Revered colleagues, distinguished civic and communal guests, including, if I may say, the newly elected President of the Greater Manchester and District Representative Council, Frank Bagel, a few hours old as the President once again, of which this congregation is a part. Current members of the shul, past members of the shul, and friends all. In 30 years as a communal and congregational rabbi, I have spoken at many different occasions. But I have to say that this is the first time I have spoken at a service of reflection and reunion, and I think at one stage we said deconsecration of the shul, but we've now called it commemoration. And of course, therefore, I've nothing to look back on previous speeches because I don't have any. I've spoken at funerals. I've officiated at divorces. I've even officiated at second marriages, which to a certain extent you could say this is a sort of second marriage, with the shul going to St. Anne's for a second lease of life, but never a service such as this. I have very happy memories of my time, albeit my short time here. It is exactly 30 years since I became the minister of this congregation. I was the immediate predecessor of my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Brownholt. I was inducted into office in this shul, of course, in this very pulpit by Diane Erentro, who at the time was the Av Beth Din of Manchester. And I have, as I say, very happy memories of this shul, which was my first congregation. In many ways, Being the rabbi of a shul such as this is almost like being a chief rabbi. As the only Orthodox congregation, you are almost the chief rabbi. You're invited to many communal and civic occasions. I remember particularly taking part annually in the Remembrance Day parade. I also remember fondly, became quite friendly with one of the then MPs for Blackpool. You may remember Norman Miss Campbell. Remember Norman? And when I moved to London, he used to sometimes come to my house. You may not know this, but I can say this now, I suppose. Norman, though he was an MP, he used to moonlight as a Crown Court judge, as you do. And he used to sit in Snaresbrook Crown Court in London, just round the corner from my house, and we used to invite him to come for lunch in the middle of a court case, and he came several times to us. And we will always treasure the time that we were here in Blackpool. But this was, in its heyday, far more than a shul. This was an entire congregation. I don't want to mention names, and I think there is a list, if I'm not mistaken, there is a list of ministers of the congregation. I'm not going to read out the names, nor am I going to mention the distinguished members who served on the executive and council. But we had a kahila here. There were ministers, we had a shochet, there was butcher shops, there was a mikveh. This was an entire kahila. And although we come, as it were, to close the shul, indeed we are commemorating over 100 years of the congregation in Blackpool, and indeed, as it says, we are reflecting, and it is an occasion for reunion. You may know that I have the honour of serving as an army chaplain. And I'd like to borrow a phrase from the military. You've probably heard of a ceremony called beating the retreat. Beating the retreats, mainly ceremonial. But originally the idea of beating the retreat was at the end of the day, soldiers came back to base and they shut up shop, as it were, they drew up the bridge or whatever, and they rested for the night, being able to say, job done. And I think what we're doing here today is a form of beating retreat. Yes, we may be closing the shul. Yes, we may be raising the drawbridge, but we are saying collectively, job done. And you know, if we look at the reasons why the shul cannot continue, the reasons are very simple. It is what I call one word: demography. Demography basically means people move. And they move for very good reasons, which we all know and are beyond the discussion of this address. But the point that I'm making is we only need to look around here today and to see the former members of this shul, this congregation, to see the people who grew up here, to see the people who learnt in the heyday here. Some of you were taught by myself, and indeed my wife, who is sadly not able to be with us today. And we look round, and some of these people, many of you, are leading lights in congregations elsewhere, be it Manchester, London, or wherever. And therefore it's a form of beating the retreat, saying, job done. Blackpool had its heyday in the past. Again, there were demographic reasons why the shul grew, and sadly there are demographic reasons why it has since waned. It isn't because everybody has suddenly decided they're no longer interested in Yiddishkeit or in a shul. It's because of, as I've said, that big D word, demography. When we finish part of the Talmud, we make a siyum to commemorate the conclusion of that part of the Talmud. When we finish a book of the Torah, as we will indeed do this Shabbat, we conclude with the words chazak, chazak, v'nischazek. We reflect on the book that we have just concluded. And this is a time to make a siyum and to say chazak, chazak, v'nischazek, be strong, and let us be strong. Whether it'll be those who are moving over to St. Anne's or those who have moved further afield, we say chazak, chazak, v'nischazek. I know that Barry, I'm sure, will pay tribute to various people. I would just like to add my own tribute to my colleague who took over from me, I think in 1985, is that right? And stayed until just last year. Refer, of course, to Rabbi David Brownholt, who has literally, together with the honorary officers, the members of the congregation, kept the shul going, as it were, all that time. And I pay tribute to you, Rabbi David, David, and indeed the members of the executive, and as I've said, the congregation itself. Can I also thank the organisers of this afternoon's service, in particular the two Russells. I suppose you could say you don't have to be called Russell to have organised this service, but it helps. And I'd just like to end with this thought, and I'm feeling very emotional myself, I have to say. We said in the Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, yesterday, Asora sheyoshvim v'yesh beineihem divrei Torah, shchina shruya beineihem. If there is a million of people and they are learning Torah, they are saying the holy words of Torah, and davening is included in that as well, prayers, communal prayers, shchina shruya beineihem. The divine presence of God comes to join them, quite literally, physically. Or as physically as it's possible for the divine presence of God, if you know what I mean. And we've had here, as I say, for 100 years altogether, certainly since the first synagogue, of many minyanim, Vasora sheyoshvim v'yesh beineihem divrei Torah, the Shekhinah, the presence of God, was here in this very building. Now it's true that unlike the site of the temple, which our sages tell us, even when it has been destroyed, it remains holy, synagogues do not necessarily retain that holiness, which is why we can, as it were, deconsecrate the shul. I hope that the shul can be saved for the Jewish community, can be used in some constructive way. If not, I suppose it may well have to become a supermarket or whatever. But that is permitted. Not going into the halachic parameters now. But that sanctity is not retained in the way that it is retained in the temple. That's why we're not allowed to go onto the temple site, because it's so holy. But nevertheless, the fact that the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, was here, right here in this very shul, still resonates and will resonate forever. And I'd just like to conclude with this thought. You all know the famous wartime song, I think by Vera Lynn, "We'll Meet Again." No, I'm not going to sing it. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when. Well, we'll all meet again. I don't know when, but I do know where. As every Jew says, whether it's at the end of the Seder service, whether it's at the end of the Ne'ilah service on Yom Kippur, L'Shana Ba B'Yerushalayim Habnuyah, we believe that ultimately the temple that I referred to will be rebuilt, and we will all go back to live in Israel, and we will all be reunited, and indeed our loved ones who've gone before us. And let's just take a moment to reflect on the memory of the hundreds and thousands of people, many of them were our parents and grandparents and teachers, who helped to shape this shul, who davened here, who are sadly no longer with us. But as we believe, ultimately the souls will all come back to be with us in Jerusalem. And our sages tell us, interestingly, that when the Messiah comes, all the shuls that were in Chutz La'aretz, all the shuls in the diaspora, will be transported to Israel. Now, it's not very clear if that also applies to all the shuls that had already closed down. But given the amount of people that we will need to hold in the shuls, because, as I've said, all the souls will come back with us, so they're going to need an awful lot of shuls. So I can only imagine that even the shuls that closed down will be pressed back into service, and that the Blackpool shul will once again flourish in some corner of Israel. I don't know where. If somebody wants to look out for a nice place, we can... So the shul, in some ways, we're closing the physical building, the doors of the shul. And it's going to get even more emotional towards the end of the service, when we blow the shofar, and I think we'll be processing the Sifrei Torah out of the shul. But that is just this physical building. But the kehillah, the community, will live on, of course, in St. Anne's, but also in the hearts of all those who I've mentioned who've gone on to other places. The Blackpool shul will endure, as I've said. We will come together, we will meet again. I suppose people will then have to decide, when they've lived in different places and davened in different shuls, I suppose when the Messiah comes, they'll have to decide which particular shul they want to daven in. You know the old joke of a Jew who was marooned on a desert island, and when he was finally rescued, the people on the rescuing ship said, "What are these two buildings?" He said, "These are two synagogues." He said, "Two synagogues?" He said, "Sorry, I don't understand. You were here alone, weren't you?" He said, "Yes, of course I was here alone." He said, "So what on earth do you need two synagogues for?" He said, "One that I pray in, one that I wouldn't be seen dead in." So let us reflect on this occasion of reunion and commemoration. It is a solemn occasion. Of course it's solemn, and of course in many ways it's very sad. But it's also a celebration. We haven't used the word celebration, we've used the word commemoration, but in some ways it is a celebration of all that has gone on here over the past 100 and so years. All the words of Torah, all the words and the songs of davening. May the Almighty listen, albeit for the last time, Lishmoa el arino vel atfilah, may He listen to the words of prayer and Torah, listen to our prayers, and bless each and every one of us, wherever we may happen to be. And let us be blessed ultimately, as I've mentioned, with the greatest blessing that we pray for, and that we say so many times a day in shul, in the davening. Particularly, we end the Kaddish prayer, Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.